And Stephen, if you could open the meeting, that would be terrific.
Sure. This meeting of the September 26, 2023 Finance Committee meeting is called to order. With that said, I will read the accessibility statement. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Microphones or telephones will be used by all speakers. Large print materials are available upon advance request. If you would like either of these accommodations, please contact Mary Waldron at 508-583-1833. The Notice of Discrimination Rights and Protections to Beneficiaries with regard to Federal Title VI non-discrimination protections and the state non-discrimination protections is posted in this meeting room and is available on the Old Colony Planning Council website. Please contact Mary Waldron at 508-583-1833 for more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And what I'll do is I'll do a quick roll call. Stephen Santasonio.
Present.
Frank Staffier.
Present.
Noreen O'Toole.
Present.
For OCPC staff, myself, Charlie Kilmer, Brenda Robeson, Sean Noel, and Nick Giaquinto. And our guest for today is Parker Elmore from Odyssey. So with that, with the roll call, I do know that Christine, she just texted me, she will be joining us soon. So I know she will be joining. And since it's recorded, Parker, I believe that we just need to give you, you're going to be sharing your screen.
Yep.
Let me just make sure I give you, oops. Give you co-host. All right. You now have the ability to share your screen. So Parker, it is your, we're taking you out of turn, number 9.
All right, then let me just pop this thing open real quick and all right, back to the presentation. And I'm gonna open up. There we go. All right. And this view. One second, let me get this to right view, but it's no, it's fine. It works. Yeah. Screen, so I can't see it. That's unhelpful. All right.
There we go.
So hopefully you guys can see this.
We can. That's perfect.
Yeah, and let me get this thing to where. All right. So we'll go to the next screen. So we've been in business since '98, just celebrate our 25th anniversary. Great fun. We're in 37 states, Europe, Australia, South America. So we have clients all over the place. So I spend a lot of time on planes. More important stuff. So what the heck has happened over the last period of time in terms of your OPEB plan? So if we go back last year, we had about $1.78 million. This year, about $2.1 million ballpark. You know, part of that's assumption changes. Part of that is experience. We'll talk about that in a second. Your assets had a good year. You went from 863 up to 996. And so the net OPEB liability, or what most people call unfunded liability, went from about 916,000 to a little under 1.1 million. And if people have questions, you can interrupt at any time. Obviously we'll just be interactive and get you guys what you need. So the service cost of the benefits being earned during the year by your active employees. So if you think about it, if Johnny or Mary works for you, they make $50,000 a year. They're earning, say, $3,000 a year in deferred comp payable as a medical benefit in retirement. Financial statement expense in a municipal context doesn't really mean a heck of a lot. And you guys aren't getting, earnings per share and options and stuff like that. So it doesn't really mean a heck of a lot. Your cost, including implicit costs, which we can talk about, but your guys' cost of running the plan on a cash basis went about $64,000 up to $70,000 over the course of the year. You guys put in $60,000 both years. And your net OPEB expense, which again, expense doesn't have a whole lot of context here, it went from $56,000 of income to $5,000 of income. And your discount rate, which is probably one of the more important assumptions, is the interest rate used to value all these liabilities, because we're taking benefit payments payable really for the next 100 years. Johnny or Mary walk into your door today at age 20. We got to value them for the next 100 years. They're probably, they continue to work, they stay with you, they retire, they keep take medical benefits and throughout their entire life. So we're trying to factor these in, and the higher the interest rate equals the lower liability and vice versa. So that's why interest rate is such an important assumption. So if we kind of look at what happened, your interest rates went up. That cut the liability that we show on the books by $45,000. I'll go to the second negative driver first, which is we increased our expectation of future healthcare costs. Part of that is stuff you're seeing in the news. Healthcare costs now are expected to go up for most of corporate America in the neighborhood of 10% next year. Let's hope that doesn't happen, but that's what the forecasts are all showing. And also, if you think about it, the last several years, everybody's had good experience, but you have to think about it. Doctors and nurses in hospitals are not going to work for increases below inflation for long. Eventually, they're going to want to get paid. So we have somewhat of a catch-up feature here that's going to happen where these guys have to get caught up to the fact they were under contracts that had certain increases built in, 3 and 4 year contracts with the insurance companies. Well, those are all coming up, and they want to get, repaid for the work they did. The other big one is you had an employee with about 20 years of service who was not in the prior census. So I'm assuming you guys probably hired them from somewhere else, or they just never gave us on census file before, one of the two. But that person's increased our liability by $146,000. So that's, when you look at what happened for the year, that's what happened. There's a person that either you hired with long service, in the system, or they were never previously reflected, one of the two. But when you look at why your liabilities went up, that's why your liabilities went up. There's a certain, actuarial stuff gets a certain level of, oh my God, it's so confusing. And it's just, groove, you guys just waving a magic wand and things happen. It's not really that, but there are a lot of assumptions to go into it. The interest rate we spoke about, higher interest rates equal lower liabilities and vice versa. Well, what's the probability people who work here continue to work here? Maybe they work here this year. What's the probability they're still there next year, the year after, the year after? Okay, they make it to retirement age. What's the probability they retire at 55, 56, 57? Okay, they elect to retire. What's the probability they elect to take benefits? What's the probability they elect to cover a spouse in retirement? And then what's healthcare costs going to be? And we have a very complicated model, which is ridiculously complicated. The reality is it works out to be about 4.25% a year inflation from now until the end of time. We have, we start at a high rate, we come down over time, we factor in GDP increases and what percentage of healthcare costs are of GDP. But the reality is actuaries make this far more complicated than it needs to be. Think about 4.25% a year and you'll be pretty darn close. In terms of the medical benefits you guys offer, your active plan is about $738 a month on average. That's a little bit on the low side from what we see. Your Medicare supplement plan of $419 is a little bit on the high side from what we see. I would say our average is about $380, so you're about 10% higher than that. But again, your costs are not off the chart in either direction. It's just, again, your active plans are a little on the light side. Your Medicare supplement plans are a little on the high side, but neither one of them are outliers, if you will. The question everybody always has, where do I stack up? There's not enough organizations like you to put you on your own comparison chart. So we're really kind of looking at how do you stack up against towns and cities. And as you can see, most of them have done almost nothing. 81% of them are less than 20% funded. So it's not real hard to look good compared to towns and cities because none of them have any money to fund this. That's just the reality of the situation. As their pension systems get fully funded in the next 10 to 12 years, then they will likely start focusing on OPEB. But for right now, OPEB is a distant concern compared to funding their pension plans. Here are some other authorities or things we came up with to kind of come up with something to compare you guys to that might be, I don't want to say meaningful, but at least interesting. Your guys' discount rate's at 537. Our overall average is about 414. But you see some people like Drake and Franklin Regional Council, they have very well-funded plans, so they're at 630. Other people who have very poorly funded plans are down at 413, or in the case of Southfield Redevelopment, their well-funded plan, but alas, their issue is that they're basically not doing any kind of funding, not any kind of investing is what I should say. So they're basically sitting in a checking account. So they're not really getting any asset returns. They're an extremely stable platform, and that's fine for them. But I think for most people, they want to be in something where we're going to generate asset returns. You can see the normal cost I spoke about when I said about, $3,700 per employee per year is what they're earning in new benefits. The statewide average is about 5,200, but again, it's very dependent on your interest rate. So if the statewide interest rate was at 5 and change, their number would also be about 3,700. So you're basically right at what that number should be. You're at 47% funded, which again, the statewide average is about 10. There are some, these 70s and stuff really skew an average. We have a couple that are over 100%, but those are very unusual. Those tend to be like utility districts, water districts, things like that. Towns and cities, I think we have 2 towns that are 100%. So it's very unusual in that regard. And your per covered retiree cost, cash out the door, you're about $7,000. I mean, you're a little above the average, but again, it's a small sample size. So I don't know that you can draw a whole lot of conclusion from that, because 1 or 2 people, choose a certain plan, and that's totally skews your numbers. So another question? Okay. So this is just taking that $3,700 average service cost that I just mentioned. This to me is just kind of, to me, the projections are useful, because the problem is you can look at numbers today and go, what does it all mean? Well, I mean, the reality is with your guys' current policy of $60,000 a year, you're projected to get the full funding in the late 2030s. So you're, 15 years or so away from getting the full funding at your current funding policy. Now, the thing is, we put these numbers in present value terms on the far right. And I do that because what happens is when you look at your liability goes from 2 million to 8 million over the next 40 years, it becomes an easy excuse for people to throw up their hands and say, why even try? These numbers we can never catch up. The numbers are insane. What are we going to do? And so the reason why I put them in present value terms is to show you it's going to go from 2 million to 2.5 million, to go up by about 20% over the next 40 years. So your liabilities are going to go up modestly over a 40-year period. You can make small changes here and there to address the liability side. And the payment side, the cash out the door cost will go from 70 to 110 over that period of time. So that's a much larger increase. On the other hand, you'll be fully funded by 2038, 2039. At that point, you're going to be paying these benefits out of the trust. So, that's the reason why you fund, is so when these things happen, 25 years from now, you have the money to pay the benefits. So, the short answer is, you guys are in pretty good shape. I mean, yeah, you had an anomaly this year because you hired a long service employee who had money in the system, and that set you back a little bit. But I mean, that's a one-time thing in theory. And so you're still on the train to, keep moving along here in the next 15 to 18 years to get fully funded. And, it's all dependent. I guess the one thing I would assure you is, and I say this with a dose of humility, I can assure you these numbers are wrong. And what I mean by that is, I don't proclaim to know when everybody's going to die, when everybody's going to quit, when everybody's going to retire. We make our best assumptions as of today, but assuredly, we do not have a perfect crystal ball that will tell you exactly what healthcare costs are going to be in the year 2063, and when Jimmy or Mary is going to retire, and whether or not they're going to cover a spouse. These are all based on our assumptions as of today, and we will keep tweaking the assumptions as we go along, as we get more information. But again, these are all very assumption driven, and that's why when I go back to, early on here when I talked about these negative drivers, our healthcare trend assumption, it's an assumption. It has no impact on your actual costs. Your costs are going to be what your costs are going to be. The interest rates change. They have no impact on your actual costs. They're going to be what they're going to be. People retire or they don't retire. They go to the doctor, they don't go to the doctor. Now, hiring people with 20 years of service, that does impact your cost because they weren't going to get benefits from you, and now they are. But really, the things you want to focus on really is, the healthcare costs. That's the hardest thing to change. It's also the thing that has the greatest impact on your actual real liability. Because listen, I can take assumptions and I can assume everybody's going to die at 65. Your liabilities drop dramatically. I can assume everybody's going to live to be 130. Your liabilities skyrocket. Neither one of those are real. They're just ways to massage a number on your books. So if you want to talk about what's actual real cost of the plan, that's benefit payments. And that's, the one thing is you can change things with, cost sharing, you can change plans. I mean, there's certain things you can do, but that's really what the money is. All the other stuff is, when do you reflect a number on your financial statement? It doesn't change the actual cost, is whether reflect it now or reflect it later. For those old enough to remember the Fram commercials from back in the day, it's pay me now, pay me later. And that's really what assumptions are all about. We're trying to make the best representation as of today. But, next year we're going to change the assumptions again based on what we know at that time. And so it's a constant ebb and flow of, we get more information and we keep tweaking the model based on the information we get. And that's really all I got. If people have particular questions about this or particular questions about the report, I'm, more than happy to dive in wherever anyone wants to go in.
I want to recognize that Christine Joy, our treasurer, has joined us along with Becky Coletta, who is our council president. So just want to acknowledge that they joined us. I'm sure there's a ton of questions. From my perspective, I guess, so I had to be reminded by Charlie. I said, who did we hire with 20 years? But of course it was Don Sullivan. And all of a sudden it just wasn't clicking on me. Of course, he does have that and he's going to retire with us. And I think for me as well, we try to stay lean. Stephen Santusonio is our personnel, chair of personnel committee. And while personnel is one thing, it does factor into the discussion that we're having today, right? Being lean and mean, but yet effective and productive and not overworked. So it's a balance. But it does factor into, where we're, looking at number of employees and looking at who we're hiring. So, in the end, right, we have someone, the one employee, and yet he's bringing in $3 million grant, to the town of East Bridgewater, right? So we still have our mission statement of addressing the needs of our communities, but yet this piece in terms of the mandate has to be also on our decision making and policy making.
Yeah, and that's what I explain to people all the time. It's, I don't want OPEB to run the organization. I mean, it's an important thing, and we want to make sure it has a seat at the table and it's recognized as a liability on the balance sheet. But you also have to run your organization. You can't let go, well, if we hire Jimmy or Mary, it's going to add $100,000 to my liability. Well, if you're the right person for the job, you want to bring them in. You can't get hung up on little things. I just want, to be aware of what your issues are, but then you guys have to make, certain business or management decisions that make sense for the organization.
Agreed. Charlie or Becky? I'm sorry, Becky.
Well, no, if Charlie had a question, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask, something along the lines of what's always on our minds is how much on an annual basis should we be contributing to the principal of our investment and also our investment strategy. It's always like, should we go more aggressive or should we stay the course? And I like the comment you had is like, you're on the train and stay on the train and continue the path. But at what point do we kind of make some alterations to say, instead of putting in about 60 or 62,000 towards the principal, should we increase that or should we decrease it? If we wanted to get closer to fully funding, or doesn't it really make a difference because the assumptions are changing every 2 years?
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the thing. I always say this all the time. It's like the answer is always going. It sounds like a cop-out, but the answer is always it depends. And what I mean by that is, what is the goal of the organization? Now, some people will tell you 100% funding is the goal. Other people would say 80% is more than sufficient. We're just trying to set money aside to have flexibility. But even if I assume 100% is the goal, over what time period? Do I want to be fully funded in 2028 or I say 2040 is fine? And then beyond that, it comes back to as I said, this is one item in the capital budget, but it's one item. And so the example I always give when I'm talking to schools is, if you have a fully funded OPEB plan, but you can't get school buses to get the kids to school, that's probably not a good use of your dollars to fund OPEB. So it's a balancing act. And so this is important, but you have a lot of other things that are also important. So it's where do you weigh that? And then as far as the investment policy, here's the thing. It's, the one I think people struggle with is, you guys have a reasonably, conservative investment policy. You're not, I'd say balanced is the best way to phrase it. And so you can certainly be more aggressive. And there's something to be said for that. But as you know, if you do investing at all, higher returns do not come risk-free. You go further out the risk curve and you get theoretically higher returns. On the other hand, when you're in the market, you go, man, I should have been more conservative. So, it's a matter of where you sit. In your guys' case, I think you guys still have far enough to go before you get to the end goal. I think you guys can justify being more aggressive. If you guys were, say, 85% funded, I think you might want to consider dialing it back perhaps a little bit and go, the example I always give, when you climb the mountaintop, my big concern is that I don't want you sliding back down. So it's really a matter of, where you sit in that. In your guys' case, you still have a fair amount to go. So I think there is an argument for being a little more aggressive if you wanted to be. But again, that's a risk tolerance, because you guys have to keep in mind, okay, if I lose $50,000 in the market, everyone's going to forget we made 50,000 last year. They go, yeah, that's great. That's last year. You just lost 50,000 this year. People have a knack for forgetting the good stuff and just remembering the bad, especially more so in your sector, perhaps, than in the corporate sector, because you guys have to go to, ultimately this money's coming from taxpayers somehow, some way. And you have to explain to taxpayers, what do you mean I lost my money? So that tends to lead to a more conservative allocation than we might see in the private sector. So the short answer is a lot of balancing items you guys have to deal with. And there's not really a right or wrong answer. It's really whichever items you weigh more heavily.
Thank you.
In other words, a lot of words not to give you an answer.
Thanks, Parker. Becky, I think you had a question for Parker as well?
Well, I'm not sure if Parker knows the answer to this. I'm not, is the amount we invest, I can't remember, annually tied to our gross amount of income, or is it a set number?
It's a set number, if I remember right, correct? The 60,000?
Yeah, you guys have been using a set number, a set policy of 60,000 a year. So it's not, you guys could certainly set it up, and we have organizations to set it up to be, some percentage of some internal metric, but you guys have a fixed $60,000 policy as of today.
Because I'm wondering, as we bring on more people, including the person who was high value but high cost, part of the reason for bringing him in is he's increasing our overall budget by bringing in money that we're using. But if we're increasing people, I think we owe it to them, if we're bringing them on, to use a piece of that increase to protect their retirement benefits, and to think about that now rather than later, when it may have more impact. I mean, adding a few $1,000s right now won't have the same impact as being short $100,000 20 years from now. So I would just put that out there, that he has brought, and he is bringing a lot of money. We're hiring more people, which means that we're increasing the OPEB liability in other ways. I thought the presentation was actually very good and very helpful and very easy to follow and understand, so I appreciate it. Thank you very much. But I do think that we need to think about whether that number should fluctuate a little bit as we grow, and take on more liability. The other question I have is, when we hire someone with a lot of years of experience, we take on their OPEB liability if they retire with us.
Yep.
But they bring other pension money with them, right? I mean, we're in a larger fund, and we sort of, some of that money moves around with them. Is there no OPEB money that moves around with people as they,
That's correct.
develop 20 years of experience in a system?
That's correct. Pension money will move with people. OPEB does not move with people. OPEB is a situation where the last man standing gets stuck with the tab. So you're incented to leave before the check comes, to use a restaurant analogy. No, I'm sorry, I gotta head out, gotta get out. And one thing to your comment about funding as people increase, one of the things that we have some communities that do is basically, like in your situation, they would say, hey, if you want to hire anybody, that service cost I spoke about, $3,700 per employee per year. You want to hire somebody, you got to fund their service cost. So if we added 3 new people, we got to add, 3,700 times 5 in funding for the year. So that becomes our new baseline. So there's, I'm not saying that's right or wrong for you guys, but every community has their own organization, has their own way of addressing that.
Question, Parker.
Yeah.
You mentioned like the last man standing kind of foots the bill, so to speak. Like,
Yep.
short of not hiring that person, even though they may be needed, is there some way to like sort of, like prevent that, or some insurance or something, like sort of? There's no.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I always have to be cautious when I have these conversations. I always say I'm not encouraging age discrimination. I'm not saying don't hire older people or things like that. So let's be clear on that. Now, I want to say maybe 10 years ago, there was a section of Mass General Law, Section 9A.5. It would basically say, hey, listen, Jimmy or Mary comes over, I can bill back that community for the 10 years of service they brought. Cool. Everybody, you would send those letters out to their communities, and pretty much I would tell you that 99% of communities took your letter and threw it in the trash. And so that was pretty much that. And then about 5 years ago in Mass Municipal Modernization Act, they repealed 9A.5 because they realized nobody was going to follow this. And the problem really is this: the pension system has mandated funding. So every pension plan has money in it. So dollars can move with Mary or Joe from town of 1 to town 2 to town 3, or system 1, 2, 3. In the OPEB case, as you saw earlier, most people have no money. Most systems have no money. So if we went to whoever this person worked for before and say, hey, we just hired this guy, you got to throw us 146 grand to cover your share. And they're going to go, and where would that money come from? We don't have 146 grand. We're on a pay-as-you-go model. And so that's the crux of your problem. Now, in theory, people move around, people leave your community, they go somewhere else, and they get stuck with the bill. The problem, as we all know, is especially in small organizations, things don't even out. You don't have the laws of large numbers work well in large communities. Small communities, if Mary or Joe come along, there's no way to hide that. So anyway, that is one of the things we all struggle with. But that's there's not a way to go back and insure that risk, or go back and try and get money out of them. You can certainly ask, but they're just going to tell you, no, we're good.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is there any more questions for Parker?
Stephen, it's Christine. We got a question for Parker.
Okay.
So besides being able to pay out of the OPEB account when it's fully funded, what's the benefit to having it fully funded?
Well, I mean, the main advantage is your financial statement is going to, now show a zero liability for OPEB in your financial statement. So to the extent that other organizations are looking at you guys for financial stability, if you guys are trying to issue any debt, any rating agency impact, things like that, people are going to look at you guys and go, hey, these guys have, made that liability disappear, so they don't have that liability in the books. I mean, and the other big side of it is really one of flexibility is what it gives you, because the reality is, let's just say you were not funding at all, just to make the math easy. And we're going to look at it go from 70,000 of pay-as-you-go payments. I'll go back a slide. 70,000 in pay-as-you-go payments are going to go over 40 years, be 350,000. And just even in today's dollars, go to 110,000. In 40 years, could the organization, the way I give people an example is, could your organization stomach an extra $40,000 to $50,000 of cash out the door today if you had to, every single year? Now, you guys might say, yeah, listen, it's not a big deal. But for other groups of your size, 40 to 50,000, they go, yeah, we're barely, getting by as it is. 40 to 50 grand that kind of money's not just sitting around. So that's really the crux of the issue. What it gives you is flexibility to go, I don't have to worry about this anymore, because what's going to happen at that point is you're just funding the service cost every year. You fund the service cost, you take out the benefit payments every year, and it's a very simple, easy exercise. So you're in today's dollars, your payments are going to be in the neighborhood of, probably still a little less than 60 grand, probably more like 40 to 50 grand a year is what you'd be putting in. And then all the benefit payments come back out. So you're really going to be like, right now, you guys are putting in 60 plus 30, you're putting in 130 grand. Once you get fully funded, you're putting in more like a number of, you're putting in 50 and taking out 100. So you're actually basically pulling out 50 grand a year.
Hmm.
Does that kind of sort of explain it?
It does. Thank you very much. I appreciate
Yep.
that.
Thank you, Christine. Do we have any more questions for Parker?
I don't think we do. It didn't look like this, Stephen. But Parker, so this was our finance meeting. We've shared the slides with our board members. I know that there's a couple board members that weren't able to make it today. And I think that what we explained to you too is that we've been in the process of updating our OPEB trust declaration of trust. That's our next step, to get people elected and have these good discussions about setting the policy, the question that Becky raised and Charlie and Christine. So, as executive director sitting here and knowing what needs to be done to address, but also it is a factor in our day-to-day work, right? We're going to be talking next about our audit and where we are with that. It's the same thing. It's taking that audit and working backwards from that audit as to how do we function as an organization, as a board, with the members. So we may have some additional questions for you. I know you're always available to us.
Yeah.
And if perhaps once we get to that level, we might be able to have you come back.
Yeah, whatever you guys need, obviously, just let us know, and we'll get you whatever we can. And obviously, like I said, it's this is one of the bigger I shouldn't say, I don't know your guys' financial statement intimately. I know for most of my organizations, OPEB and pension are the twin dragons on the financial statement, 1 and 2. So we're really trying to retire these things and set them aside. So things we can do to, kind of make that go away is good. So anything I can do to help, just reach out anytime. We'll get to where we can.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Parker.
Thank you.
So I know that, thank you, Parker. I think we're good to go, and
Thank you.
appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Um,
Parker. Good
thank
seeing you.
Thank you.
Megan, if you could pull up the agenda, and I know Christine, I don't know if you want Stephen to continue to run, or do you want to run the meeting? It's all up to you. Let's just go right into,
Okay.
Stephen, let's go
Okay.
right into the minutes.
Absolutely. Sure.
Yeah, Stephen, that would be great, Stephen. Thank you.
Okay.
I
Kinda thought so.
appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay. Next item on is the minutes, the meeting for the June 27, 2023 meeting.
I would make a motion to accept the meeting minutes.
I'll second that, Madam Chairman.
I will, Stephen, I can call the roll call if you'd like.
Yeah, if you would, yeah, because I wasn't at the
That's
meeting,
okay.
so
Don't
yeah,
worry.
sorry.
Stephen Santusonio.
I abstain. I was not at the meeting.
Okay. Frank Staffier,
Accept.
Becky Coletta,
Except
Christine Joy,
Except,
Noreen O'Toole.
Yep.
And I believe that is it. So unanimous with one abstention.
All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, and that's an action item as well. So do we have a roll call? Or not yet?
Yep, no, we need a consent agenda.
Okay, sorry.
There was a scribbler's error. The consent agenda should have gone before the regular minutes, but if we could have a motion to accept the consent agenda.
so moved.
So moved,
Second.
Becky.
I'll second.
Perfect. So on roll call, Stephen Santusonio,
Abstain.
Christine Joy,
except,
Frank Staffier,
Accept.
Becky Coletta,
Except
Noreen O'Toole.
Yep.
That is unanimous with one abstention.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is the fiscal year 23 end of year profit and loss report. Brenda?
Okay, at FY 23 closing, we had a total income of $2,668,910.
If we could hold on, Brenda, let Megan pull up the report.
Oh, the report, there is no report for that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's just me. Yeah, the only one we're gonna be seeing is the
okay,
regular.
perfect. Thank
Sorry.
you. Sorry.
While we show total expenses of $2,324,027, this gave us a total surplus of $344,883. So we had a good year overall. So that's just the end of the end of the year report now that it's solidly there.
can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
so I asked this in different forms because I get a little off. So if we had an extra $300,000, not extra, we had a net income over loss of $300,000+. Does that money go into a savings account, or are they
It
grants
doesn't
that
really
we're
work.
continue
It
to
doesn't really work that way. It's sort of every fiscal year stands alone. We have an expected income and an expected expenses. And what we have is actual income and actual expenses reports as either a surplus or a loss at the end of the year. And then for the following year, it sort of starts all over again.
But that surplus, are those grants that we are carrying into the new year?
Some
As
of
income
them,
okay.
some of them, yes, some of them.
Or
yes.
is some of that surplus money that we didn't use and we will never use?
No, it definitely does not work that way. It's, it's like we have the income is what the income is, and the expenses all within between July 1st and June 30th. And, each month we track where we are as far as this is the amount of income that we brought in, and this is the amount of expenses that we paid out. So it really is just tracking profit and loss over the course of a fiscal year. And then July 1st, 2023, it starts all over again for FY 24. And when I do the regular financials and pull up the budget for now, you'll be able to see what the projected income and expenses are for the fiscal year that we're now in. I can maybe talk to you more about that one-on-one, Becky, so I can explain it a little bit better to you. It's
Okay, I mean, it's just that when I think of income, I think of
understand.
money in the bank or money that's earned, at least, if
Yeah.
we're doing it on a earned basis, on a accrual basis.
Yeah,
But
well,
if
it sort of is, it is actually money in the bank. But we don't like to spend our money completely down. It sort of sits there and becomes part of the next budget. When we have a big surplus of cash, I generally will transfer it into savings. I mean, I think we ended the year with, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, it was like $809,000 sitting in between the two accounts,
Yes.
between the checking
Yes.
account and the savings account. We probably had about $1 million sitting in the bank.
Right,
Okay.
yeah, the
So-
savings account alone has just shy of 810.
Yes.
Okay.
So at some point in time, we should probably, in fact, maybe, I'll put it as an agenda item next month to
Yes.
see what our surplus looks like moving along on an average, because maybe we want to invest some of that money in some, in another account of some sort. So
And I
that's
think, yeah, I think that's where Becky was going with
Yeah.
this, Brenda. And I do think Becky's question is a good one for us to have at a finance meeting with a deeper dive into it. So
definitely. It's a very good question, Becky.
We all set with,
do
excuse
you
me,
need,
number-
Yes.
you don't need an approval or anything of that, do you, Brenda?
No, I don't think so. That's just me
No.
reporting, doing a report that, sort of held over from when we last met.
any more questions on number 6? Okay, nope. Okay, moving on to number 7, OCPC's accountability and transparency.
Yep.
Mary?
And I will be quick on this, and Becky and Christine and Noreen and I had a conversation about a month or so ago. In light of all the things that have been going on right across the street, or the school department here in Brockton, deficits and things of that nature, I really wanted to, number one, come out as the executive director and continue to work on our transparency, our numbers, the fact that there was a question just about the year profit and loss report, right? Having that freedom and having that ability to ask questions. There was an email exchanged earlier with John Costa asking questions, and that in itself is the fiduciary responsibility of this board. We as the staff want to be there to not only accept those questions, but also to embrace embrace that transparency and communication that we have. So I really want to make sure that a statement was made by myself in working with you as the board and your ability and your fiscal responsibility. And I think that's why we created this Finance and Audit Committee, to have these deep dive conversations. Because if there's something that comes up here as an OO, we don't want to take it to the full council if we're not ready. Conversations before this meeting, and we'll get into this where it's not on the agenda, but you know, Brenda, there was an audit, the CLA that our new auditors have coming in, and while they're not on this, that there's going to be discussions about where they are in their draft report and getting that to you, and opening Brenda's doors and my doors and Charlie's doors and any of our Sean's, that if anybody has a question, that we continue. And that part I thought was really important, to make that statement from the seat that I sit in, right? You're not here on a day-to-day basis, but we need to make sure that those questions and encourage questions of all of you. So that's all I really wanted to say. I think that it's important to do that. And I don't know if anybody has questions. You know, we don't have a $14 million deficit, can guarantee that. We may have some assets, as we just talked about, in terms of income. And again, we're still learning about how we become more transparent. So we're not the policymakers. We try to not make those decisions on our own, but making sure that we have this committee being our conscience and our check and balances, that I'm sure our auditors would love to hear that we're having those. So that really is more of a statement. And again, Christine and Becky and myself, and we've had this conversation, and they have, I know that we have their support and have all of your support for that. So I do want to be able to say that the audit report's not on the agenda. So I may, if it's okay, because it's really not on there, I may have Brenda slide in at least just an update about the audit, because again, that's transparency and that checks and balances. Brenda?
Okay, so I spoke to the auditor yesterday, and she already has a first draft completed. She just needs to check in with Markham on some last year's, just to clarify some things from last year's audit that, you know, that obviously connect to this year's audit. But the plan is for her to do the audit report at the October meeting. So, you know, we're months ahead of where we usually are. So I'm very happy about that. So the audit hasn't landed yet. As soon as it does, you know, I will begin going through it in detail. And then once I'm satisfied that we're good to go, then at that point, it will be sent out to all of you folks.
And Christine, just as treasurer of the organization, Brenda and I chatted this morning. What I think we're going to be doing is, again, she's going to send the report out. We'll have it come before the finance committee for review and discussion. And then again, offer folks enough time for them. This will probably be for the October meeting, enough time for board members to have one-on-one conversations about the draft report. Again, in the spirit of being transparent and having discussions in advance.
That's a great suggestion, and well done, Brenda. This is in past years, this has been like herding cats. So
Yes,
nicely done.
Any more questions on the accountability and transparency or the audit? Okay, nope. So moving on to number 8, August 23rd, 2023 financials. Brenda?
Okay. At the end of August, we were in good financial condition, showing a 3.85 budget surplus. So we're off to a good start. Statement of expenditures report shows total expenses for the month at $216,548.82. Cash position report shows income for the month of $292,830.77. Disbursements for the month were $396,948.66. The total cash available at month's end was $2,777,649.40. The OPEB account had a loss of $8,174.10, bringing the ending balance in the OPEB account to $1,012,687.78. Budget resources report. The receipts being $292,830.77 brings the total year-to-date receipts to $774,251.25. Moving ahead to the AAA report. Outstanding balance for AAA pass-through programs was $1,096,783.03. Outstanding balance for AAA admin and ombudsman programs was $155,472.44. This brings the total outstanding balance for AAA programs to $1,252,255.47. The volunteer.
Can I just jump in for a second? I
Sure.
can't recall what we had outstanding the last time we looked at financials. Are we are our outstandings going up or down in terms of this program?
Well, they're good. We have what we're supposed to have. The reason it's so high is because that includes 2 more months of billings. There's a lot more billings that have gone out since we last met and since the last report was done, and they obviously have not been paid yet. So the outstanding balance is high because it takes them a few months to pay the bills.
Right.
Brenda,
Okay.
if I-
We're actually in a good place with them at the moment, actually.
Okay, I was just trying to figure out, for a while there, they had gotten really behind in paying us.
They did, but they've paid all of that real behind stuff. For the most part, they've paid. There's still some, but it's like, Sean, do you want to jump in a little bit and
Sure, yeah.
clarify on that a little
Becky,
bit?
yeah, unfortunately, you'll see it next month because the payments came in after September 1st, but we received, I think all total close to 300,000. The biggest outstanding invoice that we had for EOEA was $159,000 e-invoice for nutrition funding to OCES, and that was 14 months past due. And so they actually paid all of that bill, as well as caught up the remainder of the fiscal year 22 Title III-B money, as well as some Title III-E caregiver money. So we are, for all intents and purposes, we're pretty much clear of FY22 billings. So like I said, this outstanding amount has come down a little bit, and it will come down significantly, I think, in September.
Yeah, and remember, this
Right.
report goes through the end of August, so
Right.
just
Yep.
a week later, we did receive a bunch of money, which I
I don't think it was a week. I think on the first we got
yeah, it's
219,000.
like a lot.
So
Great. All right, thank you.
Voluntary transportation account, beginning balance was $171,073.73. Restricted fund payments to volunteers were a total of $1,574.17. We received $399.16 in donations, bringing the ending balance in the fund to $169,898.72. The ROM statement and activity balance at the beginning of the month was $177,581.42. Receipts were $8,350, bringing the total receipts to $16,700. Expenses were $10,182.70, bringing the total expenses to $21,819.65. The ending statement balance was $169,429.12. Moving ahead to the budget reports. Okay, page 1, expenditures were $387,153. The spent to date percentage rate at the end of August was 12.82%. The ideal percentage in the second month of the fiscal year would be 16.67%. So at month's end, we had a 3.85% surplus. Page 2, we're off to a good start with projected income for FY24, and there are more grants in the works. Page 3, overall, the AAA pass-through funds have increased by 90,000 at the start of FY24. And then lastly on the report is a list of the accounts payable and cash transfers for May. And you might, I don't know if you want to go back and take a look at the FY24 budget, because the FY24 budget is now, the projected budget is now there. So you can see where the numbers stand. We have a projected income of $3,019,234, and projected income matches that at this time. So it's looking, we're off to a good start. And that's all for the financial report.
Thank you,
All right, I'll make a
Brenda.
motion to accept the
you
financials.
You taking over, Christine?
No, you can finish
Oh,
up,
okay,
Stephen.
sorry.
You've done a fantastic job.
I'll
I'll
second that.
second the motion.
Okay, roll call, please.
Yes, Stephen Centosonio,
Accept.
Christine Joy,
Except,
Becky Coletta,
Except,
Noreen O'Toole,
except,
and Frank Staffier.
Accept.
And that is unanimous.
Thank you, everybody. We already had number 9 with Parker, so I'm moving on to number 10, subsidizing staff parking.
Thank you. And there were a couple members that we had some emails prior to today's meeting. So one of the things that has been a challenge since beginning of the year has been the safety around this building. There has been an increase of unhoused folks, mental health issues. I so happened to do a walk around downtown with the mayor, and he came to the office and talked with staff today and concerned about our concerns, and concerned that, we might even be thinking about, potentially even selling this if it becomes a real public safety for us. Said we're not there, but so one of the things is that we had a large number of our staff parked across the street at the gas station. It was only $20, right? With being a hybrid work environment, going up to $50 a month was going to be a challenge. And so for the sake of the safety of our staff, I made an executive decision with running this by both Becky and Christine to support subsidizing staff parking. So it's currently $50. We would subsidize staff members, and I believe there's 13, Megan.
We're up to 15, Mary.
15, thank you, Sean. 15 staff
Two of the
members.
new hires.
Thank you, to park in the parking lot behind our building. One of the other things is that there are the cameras are not working there yet, but the mayor knows about it, and the cameras will he promised me to get them going. So anyway, we do have the funds in the sake of public safety. One of the things that had been brought up in terms of it being a fringe benefit, I am going to set something up with Stephen as the chair of the personnel committee to take this up and have further discussions. I would recommend that we continue to support this in the sake of public safety, but talk about the long-term effects as it is a fringe benefit, and making sure that within our personnel bylaws that we address it. So, so that is the update, and that's the recommendation I'm putting forward.
Mary, just a question. I know that there's a safety issue in general, and that's a good. I like the parking move, but do you ever give any thoughts like maybe hiring a security guard, or would that be too costly?
I think there's a lot. That's, as we know, that this board voted to support the business improvement district, right? If in fact, and it still is some time away, the business improvement district would in fact do some things in protecting and having some private security and cleaning up the defecation that's around our building. So I don't think I appreciate the concern, Stephen. I will be the first one to roll that flag up when I do think that's needed. But not quite yet. And, the mayor does want to be able to work with the counselors and the other businesses to find ways to making sure our surroundings are protected. So like right today, I parked across the street, and, I went home, moved my car so it's not behind, and it's dark, and it's getting darker as it comes along the way. This is not necessarily due with subsidized staffing, but we are investing in further lighting around our building. We are going to be investing with our Right Technology, our technology company, about getting cameras, so that this asset, both the building and our human capital assets, are both protected. So I would leave, let me leave it this way in terms of staffing. If in fact we hear of an alarm, I will ask for an executive emergency session of the executive committee if need be. I don't feel we're there yet. I really don't. And my hope is that we don't leave downtown, but those would be, I think, as we go through our calendar year, as we go through these next few months, I will keep all involved and updated.
Can I ask a question? So, in terms of it being a fringe benefit, if we were in a suburban building, we might have parking attached to the building. Does it make a difference if the parking is provided as part of the rent? In other words, if the ROM pays for the parking and gives us so many parking spots attached to our space, does that change it in terms of fringe benefits? I have no idea, but I throw that out there as an idea.
I do not know, and it sounds like that might be a good question to bring someone like John Costa, who was raising some questions prior to today's meeting. So I don't know if Brenda or Charlie, if you might have background on that at all. And it might be a question for our auditors as well.
Yeah, I'd have to think about it a little bit, quite frankly.
Good question, though.
Yeah, it's a very good question.
Charlie?
Yeah, similar to Brenda, I think we'd have to huddle on this one, and I guess just at the outset, I hope Right Technology wouldn't ask for us to pay for their parking.
Right. I don't think they're
Right,
quite.
I could see, I mean, I'm half joking, but I mean, we open that door and then tenants start asking for this same type of benefit as well, so.
Could you increase their rent, so to speak?
Exactly, it'd be like a one-off, exactly.
Yeah, to accommodate that, say, we can offer this, but we have to,
Yeah,
charge you for it,
that's,
so to speak.
So
Yeah.
Right Technology, sorry, Sean, Right Technology actually pays for their parking of their employees. They did that when they were next door to the chamber, and it's been one of what Right Technology does for their employees anyway. We just have not, as long as I know, I've been here, and Charlie, you've been here longer than I have, we haven't had parking as a benefit of being an employee.
Yeah, that's correct, and I recall you and Brenda costed it out too. If we did cover it, it's in the neighborhood of north of 13,000 a year. And
We
that's why
did.
dialed it back
Sean-
a little bit to
Yeah, Sean and Brenda, I know you and Megan were involved in this as well, just right. There were some folks who, sorry, Sean, go right ahead and answer that.
I was gonna say at our current rate, it's $750 a month. You know what I mean? So what's that, 1,500 times 6? Why can't I do math today?
7,500.
Huh?
7,500?
Yeah. No, it'd be 1,500 more than that. So 9,000.
9,000.
It'd be 9,000 for a full year. You know what I mean? If we covered the entire $50 a month. So
And and again, just because we're on this topic, so I'm the one, I'm really the only one that comes in 5 days a week. Andrew Vidal is another employee. We're hybrid, and so I think the stipend for paying for some of the parking is greatly appreciated by the employees. It shows good faith that we care about them and want to protect them. Everybody has been very appreciative of us going forward with this. So, I think, Stephen, this might be some things that we can talk about at the personnel committee a little bit more deeper, and what other things and what other benefits other regional planning agencies are having for their employees across the board, what we can afford, or as we just talked about with the OPED, and how much do we want to put additionally into that account so we can, right? There's a lot of discussion, but right now, the highest concern for me is if I become unnerved a bit in the downtown, that says a lot to a lot of people. And I just, again, the staff, I think, are in a good place. I was going to say Nick Giaquinto, he is our newest employee, and I know he decided to join us. I know he doesn't have his camera on, but right, Nick is, I think everybody has been okay with this, so I won't speak for Nick, but your thoughts, Nick, in terms of being subsidized in terms of parking?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it makes sense. And, you know, I'm glad I'm meeting people for the first time. Apologies. My camera is off. I promise you, this is not my first time on a remote call. The camera's been frustrating, but no, I mean, there's, so a little bit about where I worked in my mass development for almost 4 years. And before that, I spent 6 years with, in Brockton with Mayor Carpenter. So, I'm familiar with some of the issues that we've had with the unhoused there. It's definitely worse than I recall. So it's you know, definitely something, you know, we've been battling for a bit. But I think in terms of the parking, yeah, it's much appreciated. The subsidy for parking is super helpful. Right now, I come in around 4 days, but I would suspect that's going to change. But I'm still a new person, so it's going to take me some time to adapt. So, but with people coming in remotely, I think that makes sense. So, but nice to meet everyone. And sorry, my camera's not working.
Now, Mary, is there a way to since like as Sean mentioned, there's 15 people who would probably take advantage of this. Is there any way, since people work hybrid, only come in a couple days a week, is there any way to like cut that down, and so that people can kind of say, okay, you work Monday and Tuesday, just say in the office, so you'll get that parking spot for Monday and Tuesday. Someone else will work Wednesday and Thursday, and they'll get that spot. So if someone who worked Monday and Tuesday wanted to come in on any of those other days,
Yeah.
it'd either be SOL or they could try to work it out with someone else to kind of
So
get that spot.
good question. So the Brockton Parking Authority is an interesting organization. It's your license plate is tied to the little thing that we put in our in placard that we have to put in our car.
Okay.
Megan, to her credit, tried to say, listen, we got a large group coming in. Can we get a discount? And there was no discount. So we've tried a little bit of things, but in talking with the mayor today, and I might come back to him saying, listen, these are little things that can be changed, and why not have X amount of parking spaces that we just coordinate and manage internally, right? Just have a placard for OCPC.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I will take that suggestion and make a suggestion to the mayor and to the parking. Well, I'll have him make the suggestion to the parking authority.
I look at it as like desk sharing in an office where, people come in, they don't,
Yes.
not everybody has a desk. So you
Correct.
just kind of work out the schedule
That's right.
for everybody.
Yeah. I like your idea, Mary, because it's so simple. Reserve an area for the OCPC parking. And you wouldn't have to deal with those little license plates, this, that, and the other. Just having one area there that can be used.
So I'll follow up on both of those ideas with Stephen and Noreen.
Mary, how about a vote from this committee to
Okay.
support the idea of subsidized staff parking with the details to be worked out between Stephen and other members of the council, but that we support this for the reasons that you've provided us.
Thank you, Christine. Is that a motion?
That's in the form of a motion, a
I'll
long
second
one.
that.
And I will call the roll call. Stephen Santisonio,
Except,
Christine Joy,
Except,
Noreen O'Toole,
Except,
Frank Staffier,
Except,
Becky Coletta.
Except.
And members, thank you for that motion and for the support. And I promise you, we will set up a personnel committee very soon so we can dig deeper into lots of different options as we deal with this.
Hey, Stephen, before we adjourn, can I make a friendly amendment or suggestion for the agenda?
Absolutely.
And that I would like it, being that we're coming into the holiday season, to include October, November, and December meeting dates so that we can plan, because the way that the calendar falls is weird. It like falls on the holiday weeks. So I think we should get the dates out so that people can plan to be available or plan appropriately as to when
So,
we're meeting those next 2
Chris-
months.
Christine, if I could, just because, so October really becomes our last full month of finance. So we do not have a November meeting, and because we have the summit in December. And we leave it to the executive committee if there are any actionable items that are needed in case. So
That works then. Perfect.
And Megan, what we should do is even just to remind folks of that, just because we're back into the scheme, and we probably should at tomorrow council meeting we should probably add a friendly amendment to the agenda that is talks about the schedule for the rest of the calendar year. Did you hear
Thanks,
me?
Mary.
I think that was a
Perfect.
yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Christine. So with that said, I think we're at a period where we can adjourn. Do I get a motion to adjourn? Show of
So-
hands.
So moved.
Anybody second that?
Second.
Okay, adjourn. Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
Stephen. Well
No,
done.
no
Thank you,
problem. Thank
everybody.
you.
Good
See
night,
everybody tomorrow night.
everyone.
We'll see
All
you
right, good
tomorrow.
night.
Bye-bye
Thank
now.
you.
Carl.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good
Bye.
night.